People think there's a direct correlation. Like if I squat 300 pounds, I'm going to look this way. But if I squat 400 pounds, I'm going to look significantly bigger. It's like, well, you probably will be bigger if you increase your squat by 100 pounds, but that doesn't mean that that's the best way or the only way. Or, I mean, I've said this a lot of times. There are a lot of power lifters that can lift a whole lot more than really muscular bodybuilders. Right. And so there's no direct correlation between how much you move and how much you load a muscle or how much that muscle grows. So.
Hello and welcome. I am Coach Castle, a certified biomechanics expert, nutritionalist, and efficiency coach. Subscribe to this channel to learn the most efficient ways to maximize your muscle growth and recovery, enhance your body, and advance your mind, all using the latest science. Welcome to Castle's Corner.
Hello and welcome to Castle's Corner. I am Coach Castle, and I'll be joined today by a very special guest, Mr. Doug Brignole. Now, for those of you who don't know, Mr. Doug Brignole is a competitive bodybuilder, more than 43 years, many awards and trophies under his belt. He is a biomechanics expert, the co-author of $1 Million Muscle, as well as his latest book, The Physics of Resistance Exercise. I have one here. I recommend everybody buy one, actually. It's like the Bible if you go to the gym. He talks about something very near and dear to me, which is not gym, but efficiency, because I specialize and prioritize efficiency above all else. We have limited lives, So thank you for joining us, Doug. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and great to have you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Well, I didn't do anything for Thanksgiving this year. My family is minimal. My brother's the only one alive. And he's up in Santa Barbara, so not so convenient to get together. But that's okay. I don't make a big deal of it. Sometimes I'm invited to people's homes and sometimes I'm not, and depends on who's doing what. And so, but I don't make a big deal of it. It was nice to have the day off, and I spent the day writing.
Oh, very nice. Actually, yeah. I spent the day making Christmas cards and actually working with clients.
Good for you. Excellent. Good for you. Yeah.
Excellence doesn't take days off, I always say.
Exactly. Right.
But I wanted to ask you actually about the book I just mentioned, not $1 Million Muscle, which I also recommend everybody buy, but The Physics of Resistance Exercise. Mine is a very well-thumbed copy. I'm very dumb, so I had to read it like 10 times. But
you don't have to be dumb to need to read it 10 times. It's because not only is it's a complicated subject, but also it's kind of making us rethink old beliefs, and so it's good to read it 3, 4, 5 times. It has nothing to do with intelligence.
Oh, well, that is also true. It does take time for stuff to stick anyways.
Yeah.
But I found personally the best way for me to learn it was to teach it. So I immediately started applying it through teaching, and it's one of the best ways to learn anyways.
I've always heard the best way to learn is to teach.
But I really wanted to ask you, I know you started training when you were about 14, I believe. And as did I, by the way. I think I was actually 12, but I mean, it was okay. It was like a garage gym with horrible things.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, when did you get the idea to actually write a book, like to actually put this into a book?
Well, the first thing that I'd have to say is I have 2 huge advantages, or maybe 3 huge advantages working for me. One is that I feel everything I do on my body. If I do something, I know I feel it here and not there. A lot of people aren't connected to their body. So they do something and you say, where do you feel it? They go, I don't know. So number one, I've always been very kinesthetic. I can tell where I'm feeling it. I can tell if it's the outer part of my foot or the inner part of my foot. I can feel even, and every time I work out, I'm always analyzing. If I do this, I feel a little bit more here. If I do that, I feel a little bit more. So I'm very sensitive that way. Number one. Number two is I'm very mechanically oriented. So as a kid, I was the one taking apart doorknobs and building the doghouse, but not just building like a doghouse, pieces of 2x4, pieces of plywood. I literally took, joints and drills. They didn't use a single nail in this thing. I architectured. I was 13 years old. So I've been mechanically inclined. And then the third advantage I have is that I'm able to explain something in a simple way. So that's one of the reasons why people like my book so much, is because I'll say something like, can you see the Leaning Tower of Pisa over there? It's falling north, right? If you had to save it and you were strong enough, you had a rope, you'd stand on the south side of it. it's falling north. This is a profound lesson, right? The resistance always falls opposite the lean.
I have to
Right?
say,
So you're not going to
sorry.
do any good standing on the east side or west side.
I have to say that one of the things I really loved about your book is all of the images that you put in there, because without the images, it simply wouldn't have been as comprehensible. The
It
images
seems
make
abstract.
Yeah, it's very easy to comprehend with the images. Actually, as I was reading the book, I was actually making devices and stuff to help me understand it. But it's funny, I'm very the same way when I was a kid, very much the same way.
Yeah. So that's how it started. And I started working out because I was very skinny. I'm very ectomorphic. And right away I started doing what everybody tells me to do: parallel bar dips, upright rows. And right away I'm thinking I'm doing upright rows and my wrists are turning sideways. And I'm thinking this feels really bad on my wrists. This can't possibly be good for the wrists, and I can't really tell where it's supposed to end. I mean, I know where a curl ends. I know where a tricep extension ends. Every exercise, every muscle should have its obvious end, obvious point of contraction, obviously point of beginning, right? So I was analyzing things from the beginning. And keep in mind, this was 1975, right? So we had no internet, we had no Google, right? If you wanted to write an article for a magazine, not that I thought I was worthy of writing an article or anything, but if you wanted to, most of the time they would say, well, you don't tell us what you're going to write about. We tell you what we're going to write about, because we have, readers, and we have, a strategy for how to attract readers and how to keep readers. And so we don't want you refuting something that, we've been promoting or others have promoted. And we don't want you refuting something that an advertiser is advertising in our magazine. And so that wouldn't work. And so at the time I just thought, look, this is all interesting stuff for me. It helps me train better, train smarter, train more productively, train more safely for the competitions that I want to do. It wasn't like I was saying, I want everybody else to have the same advantage I have. I thought, no, I want to have, the advantage. I'm going to keep these things to myself. And frankly, I didn't even think that what I knew was all that valuable. I most of the time, some of the conclusions that I would come to, I thought were kind of like elementary, that everyone knows that. No, it turns out that a lot of people don't know that. So as I moved through my career, and as I was approaching the end of my competitive career, I'd find myself telling people in the gym why I was using this exercise and not that one. And so they would say, this is really profound stuff. You should write a book. And, books are a dime a dozen. They really are. There's a lot of books out there. And if someone says they're going to write a fitness book, you almost want to roll your eyes.
That's true.
Right? It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter without even saying, well, what's going to be different about it? Another fitness book?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the idea of writing my brother told me a long time ago, why don't you write a book? And I thought, everybody writes a book. I'm not going to be one of the millions who write a book.
But I want to interject here. You just, when did you realize how critical that this was to, I'll use the words here, to revolutionize in the fitness industry, because you really are going to. If not you, in the future, it will be with this information. When did you realize that?
You know what? I don't know that I ever did, really. I don't think I was thinking. I don't think I was ever. Look, let me put it to you this way. It was aha. Like, for example, understanding the value of a perpendicular resistance to a limb. That's aha, right? But it wasn't aha in terms of like, if everybody knows this, everybody's going to buy it and everybody's going to change their way of training. The big stumbling block has always been people are dumb, generally speaking.
Yeah.
The vast majority of people follow the followers.
Yep.
That's what they do. Look, if that wasn't true, if what I said wasn't true, there'd be no such thing as fashion trends.
It's true. It's very
right?
true.
People follow trends. People follow followers. If what I said wasn't true, there'd be no such thing as Michael Jordan getting paid millions of dollars to endorse a brand, or Tiger Woods to endorse. People buy the car that Tiger Woods endorses.
Yeah.
He's a golf player.
Many bodybuilders have even spoken on this. One I like particularly, if you know him, I'm sure, is Rich Piana. And he always said, he's like, listen, you think just because I'm promoting this that I use this? No, I don't. But people still, they don't think critically. They don't like to think critically for themselves.
And they don't like to change their beliefs.
No.
right? Because, and this is a fact, people's identity is rooted in their beliefs.
Mhm.
And that those beliefs are on every subject, whether they're religious beliefs or political beliefs or mechanical beliefs or whatever they happen to be, cultural beliefs, they're rooted in those things, right? So, like, for example, if you come from one of the Eastern countries, you believe that it's the parents' responsibility to select the spouse for their offspring.
Mhm.
And if you know, the Western thinking, of course, is that no, the children should choose their own partner in marriage, right? But they think, oh, no, what does the child know? This has been around for thousands of years. It's worked well enough for thousands of years. So if you were to try to convince those people that there's a better way, they will refuse.
But surely you've seen, I mean, you must have seen progression over time, not to be rude, but you've been in the gym longer than me. I know for a fact I've seen old videos and stuff of the exercises that they used to do back in the day, even 30 or 40 years ago, that are just so nonsensical. I mean, nowadays we wouldn't even consider doing them. They're just so nonsensical. But so there's definitely been some progress, right?
Well, yes, but that doesn't mean that, you know, people are open-minded to see. Here's the thing is, let's just say I tell someone, be open-minded to new information. All right, well, some new information is bad.
It's true.
Some new information is good.
Most.
And so that requires the person who I just told that to, that requires for them to have some kind of sensibility to be able to decipher. So what they should say, yes, I'm open to new information, provided it makes sense.
Mhm. Well,
Do I have enough intelligence to do that?
What I've seen too is obviously I follow you, but I've seen a lot of your interviews on other podcasts. And the main thing that really seems to strike me when you're having an intelligent conversation with somebody who's clearly intelligent and who clearly understands what you're saying, I think lots of times that they don't want to admit it just for the fact that they feel they're going to be pissing off their sponsors or having a bad reputation for what they previously had done or anything along those lines. I mean, I see it all the time. I don't want to name any names, but there's definitely been some interviews where they definitely understood you, and yet they were still playing both sides of the field, even though one is clearly more beneficial.
There is a problem with balancing honesty and commercialization. The biggest problem that we have pretty much with everything ultimately gets down to money, right? So if you are going to make more money doing this, even though it's not honest, chances are you're going to do that.
Unfortunately.
Right. I mean, look, this was one of my complaints with the fitness magazine industry, is that they must get enough readers, continuing the reader base and getting new readers, in order to sustain themselves, right? Which means that they have to keep the flow of information coming, even if all the information that is accurate has already been delivered.
Well, that's perfect for biomechanics. It's something I tell, I mean, I'm sure you tell your clients this too, but I tell all my clients, like, listen, it's real simple. Once you learn these exercises and their variants, you're done. I said, you're done. There's none of that muscle confusion. There's none of this, or there's none of that. These are the perfect movements. Why would you sacrifice a less perfect movement for fun? Like, why would you do that? Why?
It's just, so this is what happens is we live in a world right now where everybody's competing with everybody. It's very, very competitive. And now even just YouTube clicks, right? Even just Instagram likes, right? It's all a matter of getting popularity. So, and what is popular right now? Contention, right? Telling someone that they're full of shit gets you a bigger audience.
It's true. Using their name in a bad way gets you followers.
It's you can't just say, look, I'm just here to deliver information. Why don't you just take it or leave it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Look, when we see a commercial for Prel shampoo and we see this girl with luxurious hair, do we really think that she had bad hair before she started using Prel shampoo?
Exactly. It's the same thing with genetics and bodybuilding.
Right.
It's the same thing.
They picked the person with beautiful hair for the Prel. Now, am I going to call the manufacturer and say, you guys are full of shit? You know what? I know it's full of shit. And so I just move on. Right. But today in YouTube world and Instagram world and Facebook, it's all about calling people out. It's like, why don't you just, if you think that what you're saying is more honest, just keep saying what you think.
Well, that brings me to a question I really want to address with you, because I don't know if anybody has before. They probably have. I just didn't see it. But I mean, me personally, training people biomechanically and training my clients with this, I mean, the results are undeniable. You know what I mean? The proof is in the pudding. It's not debatable science. It's non-debatable. And I really feel that the people who are even attempting to go against it, they're just ignorant of what you've said. They haven't looked at enough information. So how do you deal with I can only imagine tremendous amount of, let's say, controversy around this subject, because you've been preaching this for a long time. I've only been doing it for about 5 years now, and I'm overwhelmed, and I can't even believe. I want to know how you deal with it. How do you deal with it?
Well, look, I mean, it's easy to feel offended when someone attacks you, right? And so you have to sort of dismantle it, and you have to say that, you know, they're feeling threatened. They're feeling that you're stepping on their toes. And so they feel like if your message gets out there and the people who hear your message are going to say, well, that's very different than what this other guy said. So I guess this other guy was wrong. And so they will literally invent all this, you know, dog and pony show to try to confuse the audience so that they don't know who's telling the truth. But so my job really is to prove it. My job is to get scales and to get models and to do this and to do that and to say, look, seeing is believing, right? This is irrefutable, right? If what you're saying is true, this wouldn't happen, right? This happens because this is what, you know. So, you know, it's I'm not going to play the game of getting mad and throwing insults and all that. I'm just not going to play. That's not who I am. It's never is who I've been. So all I can do is say, look, here's the evidence. Here's what proves this and this and this is correct. And then you can believe whatever you want to believe.
I'm just always impressed with how you because I mean, I debate at not the same level you do. I debate with trainers and coaches, and it's extremely difficult to break the cognitive bias. And I find myself getting increasingly frustrated as the conversation goes on. I'm just always impressed with how you just maintain your composure without slipping. It's just always impressive to me that you don't get frustrated.
Well, the first thing that I think we have to acknowledge is that we don't have to convince everyone.
True.
Right. Now, the other thing is we might actually be convincing them. They might actually know what's true, but they're not going to admit what's true because it's anti-commercial for them.
It's true.
Right. It hurts their bottom line, or it hurts their, you know, it hurts their reputation or whatever they think. So they're going to be defensive about it, even if they understand it. But the bottom line is, you know, and I tell this to people all the time because, you know, people tell me stories. I was in an argument with this guy and I told him this and this. Oh, why do you care if he believes you? He's not going to change. If you were able to change that guy's mind about this one thing, would the world be different? No,
well,
just
true.
one guy.
My viewpoint on it, I guess, is if you are a coach or a personal trainer of some form, you would want to help your clients the best possible way. You wouldn't want to hurt them. You'd want to get them the best results. So to me, it would just stand to reason you would want to take a couple months, and I mean, shamelessly promoting you here, but take your course. It's very easy to take. I mean, it's not that difficult. Take the course, get certified, understand biomechanics, and get the best possible results for your clients. It's just, why would you want to do something subpar? The best results you get for your clients, then they're going to speak better of you. You get better everything because you're helping better.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I don't know if you saw, there was a video between Lee Priest and Dave Palumbo.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so Dave is very polite, right? Lee Priest, not so much, right? In fact, Lee Priest loves not being polite. He's been banned from almost every organization for being rude and all that.
I do like him. I do like that about him, to be fair, but I know what you're talking about. I didn't like this one, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's funny to watch when he rants, right? Yeah. But you know, Dave and I have spoken. Dave understands it, right? And Dave is still entrenched in old school beliefs, but he's respectful enough of me, and he sees that what I'm saying makes some sense. And so, you know, in his mind, he'll say something like, "Well, it makes sense on paper."
I heard.
But I think in the real world, it might not. And so I might say, well, what's the real world? Well, the real world is, you know, all the past, you know, 20 Mr. Olympias. It's like, well, just because someone took one road to get to a particular destination doesn't mean there aren't other roads.
Or the best one for that matter.
Right. So, yeah, if you take the rocky road, the bumpy road, the hilly road, and you think that's evidence that that is the best road just because you arrived, right? That doesn't make any sense. But what he said was, I think, fairly profound, even though he said it with complete innocence. He says, look, all I know is that when I squatted 600 pounds, I had 33-inch legs.
That's all you know.
That is all you know,
Yeah.
right? Meaning that you know one thing that works, but you can't then assume that other things don't work, right? So what I simply say is, look, if you were to measure, if you took the best engineering methods and you measured the amount of load on that 600-pound squat on your quads, and you said the quads are loaded with this much load, and you were able to duplicate that much load or more using less weight with different mechanics, that would be the end of the argument. A muscle grows on load, period.
Well, that's
right?
what
So you
people
can
do when they go to the gym, is they want to increase their load. They just do it inefficiently by squatting and bench pressing and deadlifting, all these other things, but you're not actually increasing the load productively.
Right. So what I say is, look, if you're going to load a muscle with 90 pounds, let's just say you measure the muscle and you say, I'm lifting 300 pounds, my muscle load is 90 pounds. That means my muscle is loaded with 30% of the weight I'm using. But if I use that exercise over there, I can load the same 90 pounds with 100 pounds. I get 90% efficiency with that exercise, right? So 90 pounds is all the muscle cares about.
Yeah, no
That's
brain.
what it's going to grow on.
Yep, no
right?
brain.
But-
It doesn't know what's going on.
Right.
Just-
But the skeleton is going to prefer 100 pounds instead of 300 pounds. Now, someone could argue, because our people are arguing, no, 300 pounds is going to improve your bone density. It's like, well, maybe a tiny bit more than the 100 pounds, but the 100-pound exercise you're doing over there isn't the only one you're doing. You're doing dumbbell shrugs and you're doing this and you're doing that. You're carrying the weight to and from. I mean, you're getting a lot of, spinal loading, bone loading every time you lift weights.
Mhm.
Right. So if you're going to split hairs and say, no, I've got to do this 300-pound squat or the 600-pound squat, because otherwise I'll have no bone density at all. That's a stupid argument.
Well, this is always a big one I bring up. I mean, I know you know this, but other people have seen this before, have heard it as well. But I mean, I used to be a power lifter and I was a strong man. I just like saying this because it's funny. Back when I was a strong man, I was a power lifter. I mean, I had my home gym, but it was all deadlifts and squat racks and stuff. And I mean, I was deadlifting over 600 pounds, but I was only a 155-pound individual. I'm 210 pounds now because the last 5 to 6 years I've been training with biomechanics. But when I was a power lifter and a strongman, the reason I was lifting all that weight was I thought that's what you had to do to get big muscles. My goal wasn't to move a lot of weight. My goal was to get a specific kind of physique. And I thought that's what you needed to do it. But I mean, man, was I wrong.
Yeah, I mean, some people think there's a direct correlation. Like if I squat 300 pounds, I'm going to look this way. But if I squat 400 pounds, I'm going to look significantly bigger.
Mhm.
It's like, well, you probably will be bigger if you increase your squat by 100 pounds, but that doesn't mean that that's the best way or the only way. Or, I mean, I've said this a lot of times. There are a lot of power lifters that can lift a whole lot more than really muscular bodybuilders.
Mhm.
Right. And so there's no direct correlation between how much you move and how much you load a muscle or how much that muscle grows. So, I mean, I reached my strongest, I guess you could say, like in my late 20s, like 28, 29 years old is when I lifted them, but I kept growing. I was bigger when I was, 34, 35 years old, but it wasn't because I was lifting heavier weight. I was just lifting it more intensely and more progressively. And, so there's other things that grow muscle besides the amount of weight you lift.
Mhm. Well, I mean, an example I always like to give people, because I think genetics is very kind of taken out of this argument. People don't factor genetics. They don't factor, let's just say, drug use. But like Ronnie Coleman, the first time he walked in a gym, they asked him how long he'd been competing. Like, he looked like a bodybuilder the first time he'd ever stepped.
Yeah,
foot
huge
into the
genetics.
gym.
Yeah.
And people will say genetics don't have a part in it. I mean, my genetics want me to be a long distance runner. You know what I mean?
Mine too. Yeah.
It is.
By the way,
it is.
Phil Heath, I saw pictures of him as a teenage basketball player. He looked bigger than most bodybuilders.
He was huge. I remember I saw those pictures too. He was huge. I was like, that's him when he's like 16. What? He looks better
Right.
than I do.
Right. No, I mean, look, the thing is that when people hear this message or any message, they filter it, right? And they've got a logical side of their brain and they have an emotional side of their brain. And I mean, this is so, I don't know what to call it. Ironic, weird, funny. I don't know what to call it. But I will say that if you do a squat, a barbell squat, and your lower leg tilts forward 25, 30 degrees, you're only getting about a third as much weight load on that quadricep as you could get if that lower leg was more perpendicular resistance. So they hear the third. And so I've had people say, so is it true that you say that when you squat, you only work a third of your quadriceps?
All or
That's
nothing.
not what I said. Someone else says, isn't it true that you said that when you do squat, you only get 30% of the range of motion? No, I didn't say anything about range of motion.
And they put it together like a telephone in the game telephone. When you're
Exactly. It's that telephone game, right? It's what you hear. I say, look, squats work. They just don't work as efficiently, meaning muscle load to weight use. Some people call that external load to internal load ratio. They try to use the big terminology. It's just not as efficient. And so what do they say? Doug Brignole says squats don't work.
It's not, I mean, I get a very similar thing when I explain subjects to people who are very fond of these things. I say, listen, it's not that they don't work. It's just they're not as effective. So everything is a matter of risk to reward, effectiveness. Like, did you want to go and do 17 exercises in the gym and spend 3 hours and not get as much benefit as 30 minutes in the gym doing 3 exercises? Which do you want to do?
Yeah, just better than, worse than. It's all about, it's a comparative thing. You know, I remember one time I watched this bodybuilding contest and this guy, I think he got like third and he obviously thought he should have won. He was yelling and screaming and he said, I look good. I said, yeah, you do, but this is a comparative thing.
You look good compared to who?
It wasn't a yes or no thing. It's not like you get the first place trophy if you look good. It's like you get the first place trophy if you look better than
the other ones.
Yeah. So it's the same thing with the exercise. It's a comparative thing, right? What works better than what and why, as opposed to whether or not it has worked at all for anyone ever.
Oh, that's the thing too, is people don't actually want to believe it's this simple. Everybody wants to go on about you have to confuse the muscle. You need 15 exercises. You need this. No, you need a couple exercises performed correctly once a week, maybe twice, depending. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, because you've read the book, the analogy I use in terms of switching it up is I say, you know, look, first of all, if you tell me, you know, isn't there anything else I can breathe besides air? I'm really tired and bored with breathing air. Well, yeah, you can breathe helium if you want. You can breathe methane if you want. You can breathe anything you want to breathe, but air seems to be the best, right? So same thing with the sun. You want to get a tan. You've been out in the sun for every day for an hour for the last 6 months. You know, you've plateaued. All right, why don't you switch it up? Why don't you try incandescent light, neon light, you know, infrared light? It's like, no, because there is better than and worse than stimulation, right? So why would it benefit you if you're going to switch things up? Of course, you'd have to know what qualifies as a good exercise or a bad exercise, right? But why would you switch from an exercise that rates a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10 to one that rates a 2 or a 3 on that scale of 1 to 10? Just because you think the muscle's going to say, oh, look, it's new, I'm going to grow some. It's like, no, the muscle's going to know I'm getting less load at the beginning. I'm getting too much load at the end. The alignment isn't right. You know, something is not as good as. And so that's why I came up with those 16 factors. It's like, this is your checklist. Go through your checklist and see if the exercise qualifies by all. By the way, not everything I mean, if I'm talking about active or passive insufficiency, those are 2 jointed muscle exercises. Not every exercise or every target muscle is 2 jointed, but so not everything applies. But you know, if it doesn't apply to that, that's one thing. But if you got your checklist and you got your exercise, you can pretty much figure out what's good and what's bad. And second best, third best, fourth best, fifth best, based on knowing if this is the target, then that's a little less perfect, and that's a little less perfect, and that's a little farther and a little farther. So then, you know, if you know what is ideal, then you know what is less than ideal and by how much.
Well, that's a big thing I promote with my clients, actually, is in particular, I want all of them, when I'm done with them, to understand these things. You know what I mean? And a biggie for most of my clients, again, because these guys could be anybody. They're very busy usually in today's world, as you pointed out. We're all very busy. So they don't have all the time in the world. So what I do is I literally just have them get 2 Velcro straps you can hang from anything, 2 pulleys, 2 systems of cables, and some
All right.
grease. And they can, and they get a chin-up bar through the doorway, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They can hit every single body part
Right.
perfectly at
You
home.
can go to
no
Home
way.
Depot and you get some pulleys. That's exactly right.
It costs
Yeah.
them less than $50.
Yeah. There are people that love the idea of old school.
I used to be one.
There are
by
other
the way.
people. What's that?
I used to
You used to be one.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you what is appealing about that in just a second. There's other people that like everything that's new. Right? You know the type, right? They drive the latest, vehicle. They have all the gadgets. They have the toe shoes. Anything and everything that's new to them is better than what was old, right? Neither one of those are actually totally true, right? Because things don't fall into those camps. It's like everything has its own merits and demerits, right? So you have to be able
to you, yeah.
And not to you, but you have to know what the parameters are, what qualifies as, let's say, good shampoo, or people are very gullible. I mean, they're, as I said before, if it wasn't for the fact that people are gullible, there'd be no such things as commercials.
That's true.
Right. I mean, people, the strategy, I mean, there are companies making millions of dollars, marketing companies making millions of dollars, figuring out for their manufacturers how to get in the mind of these people so that they can persuade them into believing that this is a good product, better than something else. So I'll give you an example. I just saw an ad for Omega Watch. Daniel Craig is James Bond wearing Omega Watch in the James Bond movies, right? So there's a picture of him looking really handsome and well dressed, and he's got his watch on, and then it's got this little thing there that says, James Bond is a really smart guy. He knows what's good, he knows what's bad, he knows, be like James Bond. It's like he's a fictitious character. He's not even a real character. Right. So, but people will go out and they'll buy an Omega watch to be like James Bond.
Just so silly.
This is what happened. Now, by the way, I don't mean to offend, of course, but this tends to be human nature. People, like, if you go to, like, how many people went to to a Rocky movie and then later started boxing
For 2 days. For 2
Right.
days, Yeah,
right?
3
It's
days.
like, how many people have gone to a Bruce Lee movie and the next thing you know, they're doing this stuff at home, right? It's like, this is how our brains work, right? If we are emotionally moved by something, we'll spend money on that thing.
I think that's kind of maybe the downside of biomechanics is it's so simple. And most of the movements are things which have like already been seen mostly, except a couple of them have already been seen. They're not complicated. They're not showy. They're not flashy.
Yeah.
You don't see any motivational videos of people doing these particular exercises under control. You always see motivational videos of guys all jacked up and red and swinging weights around like lunatics and, doing the silliest things, 3,000-pound leg presses with no range of motion,
Well, there is a comic book mentality out there, right? And it's a superhero mentality. It's there are people that, think that, that the harder you work, the better off you are. The more weight you lift, the better off you are. The more intimidating, threatening you are, the better. These are all sort of comic book superhero mentality things. It's not rational. It's not pragmatic. It's not sensible. It's not mature. It's not adult, right?
It's you trying to create yourself into some kind of a character, but other people don't even see you that way.
Yeah, it's like, I just remember, as I said, print magazines are kind of like out of style now, but I remember picking up the muscle magazines and you would see pictures literally with, of course, it's paint, it's just ink, blood drops on the pages.
Oh,
right? And these guys, yelling and screaming at each other, these big muscular veiny guys, first of all, yelling and screaming isn't necessary.
Why are you doing
Come
that?
on, you motherfucker. It's like, yeah. And these guys read this, and they go, yeah. That's what I have. That's why those guys look like that. Cause they sweat blood. It's like, look, if a guy, a lot of people think it's a badge of honor to vomit during your leg workout. Because it proves that they crossed that threshold of bravery, whatever you want to call it. You work so hard. Well, Vomiting is low blood sugar. Nausea is low blood sugar. You made your blood sugar plummet. There's no correlation between blood sugar and muscle growth, right? So it's not, and they know that there is such a thing as optimal intensity, right? It's not an endless continuum. It's not like, if you do, 90 sets in one workout, that muscle is going to grow better than it did at 40 sets, right?
Yeah,
There's a limit.
I use that argument all the time because people are like, well, should I do 10 sets? How about 15? I was like, how about we just do the right intensity for 2 or 3 and we stop? How about that?
Well, and there's another thing that happens too, and that is that, and by the way, we're all guilty of this, including me. We have, certain sort of semi-subconscious thing that going, if I'm going to do 12 sets for a muscle group, they're not all going to be good sets because I'm saving myself. I'm trying to survive for 12 sets.
Oh, I've done that before back in the day. Yeah.
So if you say to yourself, look, I'm gonna do 3 sets today for triceps or whatever, and that's all I'm gonna do, take it or leave it, right? You milk each set. You get a damn good workout.
I've seen people,
right?
Yeah.
So there is a kind of a gray area where how many sets. That's part of the problem when people say how many sets and how many reps. You go, oh my God, that's a huge,
that's complicated.
Because not only does it require you knowing how you define intensity, but it depends on how much rest between sets, how long between workouts, how many reps you're going to do, what your level is right now, whether you're eating a lot, whether you're not eating a lot, what
your
goals,
your genetics, your drug use,
it's all over the map. It's there's no one answer, right? So, but again, it's, if the fitness industry had not been so commercialized, I think there'd be a lot fewer problems in it right now in terms of truthful information.
Oh, that brings me to another question. I really wanted to ask you this. I didn't know this until recently. I've had my clients send me a bunch of videos about this from Instagram and TikTok, actually. It's people who are using the word biomechanics, but they have no idea what it means, and they're promoting really crazy exercises, saying they are biomechanically correct. And I'm actually going to be doing a breakdown of some of these insane-looking things soon. But the people, they're well-known people promoting these and using the word biomechanics, but they clearly don't know what it means. Do you know about this?
Well, look, I'll just tell you that historically, there's always been that idea. As I said, I've been in the fitness industry 40 years. So, I've always seen trainers talking to a client saying, now be sure that when you do this, you move your rhomboids. And it's like, they know the client doesn't know what a rhomboid is.
Oh, they're just saying words to sound impressive.
In other words, they're using technical terms, even if they don't apply, by the way, and they're trying to do that so that it's a marketing thing. They're trying to get the client to believe that they know the science, right? Mm-hmm. So whether you're talking about biomechanics or whether you're talking about the word bias, this is a quad biased exercise, or you're talking about, evidence-based, or you're talking about, what are the other words they use? Hypertrophy instead of just saying muscle growth.
Yeah, they love saying hypertrophy.
Look, this is a common thing. It's been happening for years and years where people try to sound more educated than they are. It just so happens that right now, maybe I've had something to do with this. I don't know. It just so happens that, biomechanics is kind of the buzzword now, which, by the way, doesn't mean that anyone who uses it, meaning you or me, that we're also in that category of people using it as a buzzword. I mean, we're using it because look, one of my endorsers, Wayne Westcott, is a PhD in exercise science. And he's told me, and a number of other people have told me that, when they were getting their PhDs in exercise physiology, there was very little mention of mechanics, very little mention of physics. So when you get a guy who's an exercise science PhD, he often thinks he's expected to know what qualifies as a good exercise or a bad exercise. But, what you studied was, the muscle fibers themselves, right? The fuel that works in this scenario versus in that scenario, right? So this might require more protein. This might require more carbohydrate, blah, blah, blah. I spent 4 days with Wayne Westcott recently in Massachusetts. And, there's a huge overlap in exercise science, exercise physiology with nutrition. right? So biochemistry is part of exercise physiology, but mechanics, physics, not so much.
I actually
Right.
came upon you. I don't know if it worked out in a good way or a bad way, but I came upon you on Rick's Corner at the same time or just after I had been binge watching hundreds of hours of Richard Dawkins speak about evolution, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, so it actually worked out great, the combination of the two things, because it really helped me understand the human body. And I actually had several other books relative, not necessarily to biomechanics, but to evolution. And I was at the same time, it was very, very helpful.
Yeah, I've got dozens of evolution books here, dozens. One of my endorsers is a paleoanthropologist, and he said that, yeah, I mean, literally knowing our evolutionary history provides us with a blueprint for what is considered natural motion and what isn't considered natural motion. So it's foolish to ignore it. It's like like these guys are basically forensic scientists. These guys look at a shoulder joint of a caveman and they can tell you what it was designed to do or not designed to do. Right. So yeah, there is a huge overlap there in terms of our evolutionary development, our muscle function and our skeletal function and all that. So, but a lot of people don't want to use that. It's by the way, I also sort of think that there's a blending of like beast mode mentality and exercise science. So if you're an exercise science guy, then you can't have or show an affinity for beast mode thinking. Why? Because they're sort of opposite. That's why, right? Because when you train smart, you maximize the load on a muscle with a lesser weight. That's not very beast mode-y.
But you could, I don't know if I want to disagree. Maybe you'll tell me I'm misunderstanding, but I absolutely go crazy when I go in the gym. But I do not quite failure training. I usually stop just one rep short of failure.
Oh, that's different.
But
that's different. Maximum effort.
Yeah.
If you want to call beast mode maximum effort, I'm 100% in agreement with that.
Because
I'm talking about beast mode in the amount of weight you're lifting.
Oh, I see. Well, I think in my head, it's because I mathematically understand that I'm actually lifting thousands of pounds. It's not.
I just wrote an article. I'm going to post it here soon. I wrote an article called Heavy Lifting Redefined. And basically what I say is that instead of thinking of heavy lifting as an amount of weight on a squat or an amount of weight on a deadlift, why don't we think of heavy lifting as an amount of effort?
Well, that's good.
With 6 reps of an exercise, regardless of what exercise it is. If it's an isolation exercise, if you're going to do a cable tricep extension and you're going to put so much weight on there that you cannot do more than 4 or 5, maybe 6 reps, that's heavy lifting.
Well, absolutely. You have to
pushing
have
as hard as you can. Yeah.
Yeah, that's full focus. That's full brain power. You are only in that moment doing that with the best of your ability. You're not thinking about it. No, that's beast mode. For me, anyways.
But beast mode, generally speaking, is people bending bars, people, squatting, 500, 600 pounds, the plates are clanging and there's a circle of people around you and it's a ritual and it's like.
Maybe it's me. I always thought it was just the intensity brought to the gym. I mean, because even though when I was squatting or deadlifting or whatever, my best friend Jackie has a great story. She saw me snap a squat bar and bend a deadlift bar. And shit. But the intensity that I brought to those lifts, silly lifts, was exactly the same intensity that I bring to my leg extensions and my hamstring curls and everything else that I do.
Well, that's great. And look, if I'm all for it, if you want to believe that beast mode is the amount of effort, 100% agreed. I support that 100. But what I'm saying is it's foolish to start to move in the direction of selecting exercises that allow you to lift as heavy a weight as possible, because that's how you interpret beast mode.
That's fair. I really wanted to ask you this one. We kind of touched on it, but I want to get back to it because it wasn't directly asked like this. Is when you're doing your seminars or when you're chatting with trainers or whomever you're talking with, there's going to be like a lot of, as we've said, like resentment or unwillingness to listen or a closed mind. Is there any strategy that you implement to break those cognitive bias, or do you just kind of treat it like I'm going to do my best here, and if they're going to be persistent in their choosing to be ignorant of this or their lack of understanding, I'm just going to ignore it? Or do you have a strategy you implement to kind of get through those barriers?
Well, the first thing I'll say is most people's minds don't change very easily. So if I encounter someone who is, trying to resist what I'm saying with illogical arguments, I'm not going to try to change their mind.
Yeah.
Their mind is made up.
Yeah, walk away.
Yeah. Thankfully, most people, that attend my seminars are attending my seminars because they've already seen something of my videos or books or whatever, and they get it. They understand. Now, there is such a thing, like, for example, Wayne Westcott, he said, well, isn't it true? I like, if someone's going to, I guess, contest something I'm saying, this is the way to do it. Is to say, well, when you're doing a parallel bar dip, doesn't the upper arm lever play a role in the extension of the elbow? Isn't it also being extended by the tricep? Isn't that bone also being operated by the tricep? Right. So that's a respectful way to ask that question. Right. If somebody's going to give me like a ridiculous thing, I would say, well, so what I said was, look, this is a good question, by the way. Wayne's question was a good question. So what I say is this: for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. We all know that, right? Okay. So if you were to take, those little hand spring things that exercise your grip. Okay. So let's just say that I'm going to push this side, right? But I'm going to hold this one steady. This thing is going to want to move away from me, right? If I hold this and I push that way, that one thing's going to want to move away. That's the equal and opposite reaction, right? When you're doing parallel bar dips, there's no tendency for your hand to slide back on that bar. It's pushing straight down, right? And so I say, look, try this. You're in a chair. You've got some armrests. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to just push down on those armrests a little bit and just elevate your body a little bit. But now what I want you to do is, instead of pushing down, I want you to push back. Right? So now all of a sudden you feel your triceps working, but you realize when I'm doing dips, I'm not pushing back. Right? So if the upper arm is actually doing this, the lower arm would be doing that. And you're not feeling any of that. In fact, you could put oil on those dipping bars and it would still not slide back. And better evidence of that is this: when you're doing that sissy squat bench, where you put your ankles behind that roller and then the pad is on the upper part, the back part of your lower leg. When you rock back, that forefoot, that tibia goes forward against that pad, and the foot doesn't even touch the ground anymore. That's what would happen if the tricep was extending the upper lever. You would have so much force going back that you would actually have to have a pad behind your hand in order to stop it from sliding back. And there isn't an equal and opposite reaction, right? Not to mention the fact that the upper arm has a different job to do. Its job isn't to help extend the elbow. Its job is to push the deltoid forward, the front deltoid and the pectoral forward. That's its job, right? And so you're going to look at its job and you're going to look at its moment arm, because it's too busy to be doing that. It's trying to do this.
I think a very maybe misunderstood thing is just the very simple physics of it. And I find, I get the idea from your book, obviously, but whenever I'm teaching my clients, even on a video call, I always use things like a sledgehammer and like a lever with a hinge on it, because it's the easiest way to actually break this down to people. But I just feel like people in general have no knowledge of physics. I started off with some, so it wasn't that bad for me, but I think most people in general don't have knowledge of basic physics.
Well, it's true that some people are more mechanically inclined than others. As I said, I was taking apart doorknobs. I was building a doghouse, right? In other words, I was already fascinated with how things work, right? So even now, if something falls in the kitchen, the first place my mind goes, it's not even that I try. My first place my mind goes is how did the weight shift? Why was the base so narrow? Why this? Why? I mean, this is just the way my brain works. I'm always thinking in terms of, mechanics, physics, when you're driving a race car on a racetrack, why is the road better to be banked? Well, centrifugal force, right? So these are all things that to me have always been fascinating, but a lot of people don't have that ability to sort of think three-dimensionally that way. So that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is, I actually consulted with structural engineers,
I didn't know
right?
that.
People that build buildings or that approve plans for buildings and bridges, right? And structures, right? And they know where loads go and where loads don't go, right? And so we were talking and they said, because let them have the book first, and they read the book and they said, this book was amazing because everything that you explain in the book is factual. It's true. And yet when I've been in the gym and I've done those things wrong. He goes, and the reason was because I wasn't thinking of the body as a bridge or a building. In fact, I didn't even know where the muscles connect.
Oh, that is so. I have doctors and nurses, a few who are clients of mine, and one of them, you would really think he would know this, but he's in the gym. He's doing leg raises for his abs. He's doing incline bench press, and I had a chat with him about it. I think the third time we had a meeting, I'm like, listen, we're learning about biomechanics. So I gotta know what you know. And he told me all this stuff. I'm like, but you're a doctor. You know that your legs, those muscles aren't connected to your abs. Why are you doing that? It doesn't make sense. And he looked at me. He goes, you're absolutely right. I don't know.
I never thought of it.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's what I said from the beginning is people follow the followers. Now they think they're following the leaders, but they don't realize the people they're following are following other people, right?
Well,
They're not leaders. They're not people who've thought this thing out. They're people who are copying. But the problem is if you see Arnold Schwarzenegger doing leg raises in the gym and he looks magnificent, you think he knows.
that's an argument from authority. I tell people all the time that they'll see me and what I look like, and regardless, I'm not that good, but they'll see what I look like and say, oh, you must be a trainer. You must this or that. You must know what you're talking about. I said, no, don't believe me because of what I look like. Please believe me based on what I tell you. Please.
Right.
I tell them all
because there's a
the
lot
time.
of other people that also look good that are going to say something completely different. And if you're going to use just appearance as a barometer, then you're going to be thrown off.
And I love, actually, I meant to bring this up. I love the chapter in your book where you address where exercise came from, because I had a rudimentary knowledge of that beforehand, but your chapter was very interesting to me. Would you mind going into that for just a minute?
Sure. Well, basically what I was saying was that in the early years of humanity, right, you can imagine how barbaric those times were, right? I mean, I just saw Lonesome Dove. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Lonesome Dove. It's a Western, but it isn't prehistoric times, but it's still, early America, which means there weren't paved roads, there weren't gasoline cars, there weren't telephones, there weren't, electric lights. And you sort of immerse yourself in that kind of mentality and you think, what would life have been like back then? There's no government. If there is a government, it's very rudimentary. There's no laws, there's no police, there's no orders, there's no courts. There's very little. I mean, most of the people, like there's one scene which surprised me. This guy dies and he had two girlfriends and he sends his buddy, give these two girls this note, here I am on my deathbed, tell them that I love them, blah, blah, blah. And one of them reads the note and is friends with the other one and says, would you like, well, it's a long story. She says, would you like me to read it for you? And I realized, she wasn't literate. So you can imagine, caveman days, there were people that literally, they could not read. So they could not learn biomechanics or anything else, right? So it was just literally dog eat dog. It was just a matter of physicality. If I can steal something from you and I'm hungry and I want it, I'm going to steal it from you. That's just the way it was. The bigger you are, the bigger advantage you have. If you're bigger, you're stronger, you can hunt better. If you're bigger and stronger, you're going to be recruited by those armies better. I mean, if you're puny, you're not going to get a girlfriend, you're not going to get a wife, you don't get anything, right? So back in those early days, physicality was everything, right? So then as things started getting a little bit more civilized, there were, basically audiences that would pay, whatever they would pay, pennies, right? 5 cents to see a strong man lift, an elephant. So he would, let's say, get on 2 huge boxes and he would put a strap underneath the elephants. And basically he would do a deadlift, lifting the elephant off the ground by, usually a baby elephant. So they would do these things for entertainment, right? So eventually it got to the point where these strong men all kind of wanted together and they wanted to sort of standardize the lifts so they could be somewhat competitive. So there was a thing called the floor press, which is basically the bench press, right? So the barbell's on the ground and you can't slide under the barbell. So they put the barbell on wooden blocks, just enough to slide underneath the bar so it's barely at your chest. And from that point forward, you press it up and then you bring it down again. Now this is a standardized lift. Now I can do this. How much can you do? Well, this is human nature. Comparison, right? So it wasn't just a matter of saying, hey, I want to be stronger. It's I need to be competitively strong, right? So even gymnastics, even acrobatics, chin-ups, leg raises, all of those acrobatic types of things all became competitive. And, this eventually moved into like the military and universities where they would literally give you, strength tests. You have to do 25 push-ups. You have to do, it's like, this is the society that we've lived in. Is like, well, you're not going to be respected. You don't qualify unless you could do this exercise this many times with this body weight or whatever. And in those early days, it was considered vain to develop a physique. It was all about strength and health. Those were the ones that were equated, and not only strength and health, but morality. It was a banner.
Yep,
there was a banner, right? So there was a banner at the bottom of one of the magazines that says, "Weakness a crime, don't be a criminal." Right? Well, I mean, talk about, making someone feel guilty. Like, oh, because I'm not an endomorph, because I'm ectomorphic, because, I don't have a large bone structure, because I don't appear to have a muscular physique, I'm actually immoral, right? So this is the mentality, right? So then, of course, it started creeping in. And of course, I should interject right here that we have to remember that the only way to build a muscle is to load a muscle, and loading the muscle makes the muscle stronger. So they're not separate. The idea that you're going to build your physique isn't just a vanity thing. It's also a functional thing. So then eventually it became acceptable that physique could be its own goal. But most of this has still carried over, this whole idea of like having to, I still see it in Men's Health magazine or these magazines that say, how much should a man squat? Mm-hmm. Well, he should squat his body weight.
Be able to,
right? An average Joe, yeah. Right? An average Joe, it's quote unquote, the average Joe guy should be able to squat his body weight. And if you're golden, 1.5 times your body weight or more, well, it's like, I can load my quadriceps. That for me, I'm 200, I'm 195. I can load my quadriceps much more than a 195-pound squat would without the spinal load, much more comfortably, much more effectively. And I can work my spine and my erector spinae other ways. But the idea that these magazines would be laying down these kinds of, rules, like this is what you should be able to do, it appeals to people's mentalities of like, how do I rate? Everyone wants to know, how do I rate?
Compared to the other guy.
And I would say, never mind how you rate. Be better. Mm-hmm. Be better than you were. Be the best you can be.
Exactly.
Right? Work hard. Work as hard as you can. Be the best you can be. But never mind how that compares to anybody else.
I wanted to ask you about this too. If you're done with that, I wanted to ask you about this because it's a question I get from people all the time. No, I've researched this myself. I don't know if you have spoken of this in your book. I don't think so, but it's lagging muscle groups. Now, for me, I've had lagging muscle groups. We all do. But my understanding of it is if you have a lagging body part, you just have to train it to the best of your abilities at the same time as the other ones. And that's what I tell my clients. Now, there's strategies I've heard, such as if you have weak biceps, for example, eat more food the day that you train biceps. That it seems not, you know what I mean? It's just those kind of things, they seem nonsensical. They say train biceps more frequently. There does seem to be a little bit of evidence for that, but it does also seem to be for like a set period of time, like not for too long. And then the gains will kind of plateau again, if you will. Right. So what are your thoughts on lagging body parts?
Well, the first thing that a person should ask is, why is it lagging? Right? If it's lagging, it isn't. And if you've been working everything evenly, it's not because you've been neglecting it. Right? It's lacking for a genetic reason. All right. So that's not going to go away. That's there. So the question is, can I overcome that genetic tendency to have that body part lag? Right. So then they say, well, should I train that muscle harder? And I would say, harder than what? They say harder than the other muscles. And I go, so you're not training the other muscles as hard as you can?
It should be
I mean,
maximum effort across the board. Yeah.
Yeah. Shouldn't you be training everything as hard as you can? Right. So, and is there such a thing as working it harder than as hard as you can? Right. No, I mean, as hard as you can is as hard as you can. Right. So now, yeah, thank you. There is a thing that's fascinating. Getting back to this thing we were talking about before about how many sets and how many reps. There is some research now that suggests that people get more growth when they do more frequency with less volume.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just say instead of doing, 10 sets for a body part once a week, you do 5 sets for that body part twice a week. Now, the first thing that I will say is that if you were to switch from this to that, you might get some growth just because it's new, right? And so the question is, will it continue? And will it eventually end up the same way the other one ended up?
Real fast, I just want to clarify because I think I know what you mean, but I also want to be clear because you're not talking about muscle confusion. That's not real. You're just speaking about the fact that you changed your volume in your rep scheme.
Right.
I just want to be clear about that.
Right. So let's just say that I do my biceps once a week or once every 5 days, and I do 10 sets. And so this person, let's say this person who claims to be an expert on bringing up lagging body parts, says to me, okay, well, keep doing that for all your other body parts, but for your bicep, either work it with 10 sets twice a week or split it between 5 sets and 5 sets. In other words, get an extra bicep workout in there during the week, right? One of the first thing I would say is if that works for the biceps, then it would work for everything else.
Yeah.
And wouldn't you do everything else that way too then? Because you want everything to get better, right?
Yeah.
So unless you say, well, no, I'd rather that my biceps catch up, if that's possible, well, I would say it's worth the experiment. That's what I would say. But you said something earlier, which is true, which is they have done studies where they said if you work a body part every day or every other day, it does respond, but then it plateaus off again. Like within 2 weeks, it crosses into overtraining.
Yep.
It's too often. So in the beginning, it doesn't get to that point. But after, 10, 12, 13 workouts like that, it says, okay, I'm going the other way now. It's just too much.
I don't know if you want to comment on this, but it just brings up a question to mind is like site enhancement. So for example, we're talking about taking steroids now. So obviously all the sites you can take them, but for example, I don't want to confuse this with inflammation, but if you are injecting a small amount in the particular muscles you're trying to grow, would there be a site enhancement effect there?
I don't know. I've never tried that. I've heard that the reason why bodybuilders today's their deltoids are bigger than they were, in the 80s and 90s is because they're injecting it into the deltoid now instead of into the gluteus. I don't know. I don't know that firsthand. I've never seen it. There might be an inflammation effect. I don't think that the steroid works better where it's injected. If that were true, everybody would have huge glutes.
I would agree with that because that was always my argument. Is most guys inject in their quads and their glutes, and I do know some who will inject in their chest and even their biceps and calves.
Yeah.
But I would always kind of said that was more of an inflammation effect from having the oil under your skin than
and by the way, you can sort of see sometimes that it's not even. There's like a little bump there.
Yeah, like a bump. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think that's. Look, when we look at the physiques from the 80s and 90s, when you look at the Samir Banuts, and you look at the, Francis Benfato and Bob Paris, and, these guys had beautiful physiques. When we see a guy today with like enormous deltoids, at first glance, it's impressive, but it's not really normal. It's not really symmetrical. It's not really, it doesn't quite look like the statue of David or the Farnese Hercules, right? So there's something odd about that look.
We
live in a society where people don't care what is aesthetic. They want to impress.
They want to shock and awe. They want
exactly.
people to look at them. They want people to look.
They want respect.
Synthol is a great example, I think, of that. Like gone too far is people taking synthol in their muscles and other site enhancement oil. You've seen that? It's horrible. It's just horrible.
And a lot of these people think they actually look good.
Yeah, they have like a mental problem. They think that, oh, look at my chest and look at my arms.
Yeah.
Oh
And the
my God.
trapezius, they get these lumps in their trapezius. Here's what's weird too, is I probably shouldn't care about this, but if that person with all that synthol bumps everywhere encounters someone on the street who's never seen a real bodybuilder before, they might think that's a real bodybuilder. They might think, oh my God, I saw a bodybuilder one time. And it was the most grotesque thing I ever saw. It's like, no, you didn't see a real bodybuilder.
I hope there's not that many of them. I mean,
I think look, sometimes they're in these, these third world countries, right? So sometimes, they're not exposed to a lot of modern day gyms or nutrition or anything. So they're not likely to have seen a real bodybuilder before. If they see that person for the first time and they think that's actual muscle, they're obviously going to hate it. They're going to think it's the most ugly thing I've ever seen.
It doesn't even look like, it looks like water balloons. It doesn't look like muscle at all.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so crazy.
And you can't flex it. It's not striated.
And it's painful. I understand it's very painful as well to even move it I don't know. It sounds like it's painful. It seems like it's painful.
And it has to be bad systemically for you. I mean, that stuff has to seep into your system. It's almost like a breast implant that leaked.
Oh yeah. Yeah, kind of, I guess.
I would imagine, right? It's like you don't want your breast implants to leak for a reason, right? You want to keep this thing over there and that thing over there. Now you don't want them blending together. Well, the synthol is just, you put it right in your skin. It's not a pouch.
Oh man, I haven't thought about that in a while. I know why it came to me. Sorry, I haven't thought about that in a while.
No, but that's a fascinating subject. I mean, from a psychological standpoint, it's a fascinating subject.
I don't even know, because I wouldn't even say that they're lazy people. Like, they definitely want to get bigger and they're willing to do whatever it takes. It's just, it's a shortcut, but it sure is a painful, weird, gross, psychologically disturbing one, in my opinion, anyways.
Look, I mean, we've all seen bizarre things, right? We've seen people do cosmetic surgery to their face and they think it looks good. And we go, you did it on purpose?
I mean, to each their own, I guess, to each their own. I always say, be you, just be you. Otherwise we all be buying those watches, and so be you.
Right. Well, but the problem, I mean, look, that's really good advice. But the problem is that they don't have a sense of what's okay. I mean, they're literally counting on society to tell them what's okay. They would have an internal opinion. They don't have a barometer. Look, when you go to the newsstand anywhere, either a grocery store or anywhere, you go to a newsstand and you pick up some of these magazines, and what you realize is that they're targeting people that want to know how to be. You say, just be you. They don't know how to do that. Magazine, please tell me how to be, how to dress, how to speak.
No, that's very true. Yeah.
It's, people are generally lost. And I suspect it's because they're not exposed to as much literature. They're not exposed to as much intellectual information. And so they're living in a world of social media where everything is about social media.
They just get buried in it. I mean, one of the main things I have to teach every single one of my clients is focusing techniques, very basic things, because they can't hold a conversation for more than 10 seconds. They're just distracted. It's horrible. Yeah. Another thing people get all the time, and I hear this all the time, it makes me sick when I hear it, is you are perfect the way you are. No one is perfect the way they are. Everyone can be better. And when you tell somebody you're perfect the way you are, you're basically damning them.
You're telling them don't improve, don't change anything. It's like, well, what if I need some serious changing?
And everyone does, and everyone knows that they do. Everyone knows they do, But I don't want to take up any of your time. I know I just had you for an hour today, so let me get out of here with you. Thank you so very much for doing this. I hope we can do this again soon.
We should do it again. This was fun. You're a great guy to talk to.
Thank you very much. And I mean, I can't thank you enough for all you've done for me. I'll be thanking you forever. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Castle. You're great. I appreciate you.